opening the door to queenside expansion. c4 immediately stakes a claim on d5 and hints at future pawn breaks. Immediately contesting the center with this pawn thrust dictates a dynamic and principled response to the English opening, aiming for active piece play. Developing the knight here supports the center and prepares for kingside castling, offering flexibility. Developing a knight towards the center, this square is a classic outpost, preparing to contest the d4 square and potentially eyeing the kingside. Preparing to fianchetto, the king's bishop opens up diagonal pressure. Actively challenging white's center control, the bishop immediately pins the knight, seeking counterplay. Gaining dominion over the central diagonals, this bishop prepares to castle and solidify king's safety. Securing the monarch provides immediate safety, allowing future ambitions to be explored with confidence. Developing another knight further solidifies central control and prepares for kingside castling, ensuring safety for the king. Securing the e-file and preparing for potential pawn breaks offers a solid foundation, but it does commit the rook prematurely. Doubling the rooks on the open file fortifies the queenside, preparing for a central pawn push while keeping the king securely tucked away. Solidifying the center and preparing a queenside pawn push, nc6 elegantly supports e5 and eyes d4. A bold knight sortie, seeking to disrupt black's development and seize central space at the potential cost of creating pawn weaknesses later. Relocating the bishop here creates active diagonal pressure, eyeing white's potentially exposed queen. Solidifying the center, this advance offers a flexible pawn structure and prepares to activate the light-squared bishop. Trading the knight clarifies the center and potentially opens lines for black's pieces. Reclaiming the center and opening lines after the exchange offers a clear structural advantage and better piece activity. Injecting a knight to d4 disrupts white's pawn structure and opens diagonals, posing immediate tactical questions. Repositioning the knight to d2 bolsters the center and prepares for a potential d4 pawn push, aiming to open lines. Solidifying the center and preparing a potential kingside pawn push adds resilience to black's position. Solidifying the center, this pawn advance creates a robust chain and prepares to develop the king's bishop, aiming for a harmonious setup. Reclaiming the knight's active square after a brief retreat, this maneuver aims to disrupt white's center and potentially pressure the pinned pawn. Reasserting control over central squares, this knight repositions aggressively to threaten the enemy's d6 pawn and potentially disrupt black's coordination. Gaining queenside space, black repositions the bishop to a more active diagonal, eyeing white's pawn structure. Developing the bishop to a more active diagonal, aiming to influence the center and prepare for potential queenside expansion. Preparing to contest the queenside space, this flank expansion prepares for future pawn pushes and potential piece maneuvering. Expands queenside space, aiming to disrupt black's developing harmony. Steering the bishop toward the queenside opens diagonals and aims to unburden the queenside pawn structure. Targeting the weak b7 square, white awkwardly places the knight, sacrificing mobility for a distant threat that black can easily parry. Retreating the bishop to c8 sacrifices valuable development time, allowing white further control of central squares and potentially hindering black's queenside expansion. Asserting pressure along the open c-file, white seeks to exploit the slightly passive nature of black's bishop on a7. Shifting the knight to the kingside aims to contest the central control and avoid the outpost on c4, but it sacrifices some tempo and king safety. Securing the c-file, but surrendering the initiative to black's centralizing knights. Challenging the center and opening lines, black boldly injects immediate dynamism into the otherwise static position, potentially exposing white's king. Unlocking the c-file and bolstering the d4 pawn's defensive structure are primary objectives now. The rook retreats, preparing to join its sister on the open c-file and bolster the queenside pawn structure. Repositioning the rook to support the queenside pawns and potentially prepare a central advance offers new attacking perspectives. Exploring diagonals, black repositioned the bishop to a more active square, eyeing potential queenside weaknesses. Unleashing a central pawn storm, white aims to dismantle black's king's safety and seize the initiative. Unleashing a knight to the enemy's doorstep, seeking initiative and disrupting white's central grip. Sacrificing material to open lines toward the enemy monarch is a bold gambit, aiming to exploit black's slightly misplaced knights. A bold recapture, injecting immediate tactical life into a previously positional struggle. The knight's repositioning aims to exploit the c4 square's influence, potentially for future kingside pressure or to challenge black's pawn structure. Black seizes the initiative by disrupting white's central pawns, opening lines for counterplay. The doubled rooks now dominate the open file, creating significant pressure on black's kingside. The bishop retreats to safety, ready to reinforce the queenside's defenses. This pawn push aims to disrupt black's bishop's retreat, potentially opening lines for white's rooks. Challenging the queenside pawn chain, black aims to disrupt white's space and open a diagonal for their bishop. Opening the b-file now creates dynamic chances and might lead to a favorable pawn structure for white. This piece vacates the diagonal, aiming to disrupt white's central pawn push. Opening the c-file now forces a decision on black's bishop placement, potentially creating weaknesses. Black concedes the open c-file, strategically simplifying into a position where piece activity will be paramount for survival. Suddenly, a queen emerges, probing for weaknesses and threatening to unravel black's cramped position. Attempting to untangle the pawn structure by offering a gambit, black concedes key central influence. Unlocking the b-file offers vital counterplay, potentially disrupting black's pawn structure and creating attacking chances. Repositioning the bishop to a more active diagonal addresses the cramped queenside pawns. Unlocking the bishop's diagonal suddenly creates an attacking threat on the queenside. Shifting the rook to the 7th rank aims to activate it, perhaps preparing for a queenside push or defensive support. Securing the d-file aims to initiate a decisive kingside assault by freeing the rook for active participation. Reclaiming the open d-file strengthens black's central control and prepares a potential kingside initiative. Pushing the pawn to d6 creates an inviting target, but also offers remarkable attacking potential on the kingside. Developing the bishop to d7 aims to free the c8 square and potentially support an f4 pawn push, but it blocks the rook's potential access to the c-file for now. Guarding the king's escape squares opens a subtle path for pawn advances down the h-file. Securing the king's escape route while preparing for a potential pawn advance on the kingside. Securing the king's escape route while preparing for potential complications on the kingside. Seeking to exploit the exposed white king and potentially activate the g-file. Concentrating the rooks along the 2nd rank solidifies control, preparing to challenge black's central pawns. The rook's repositioning aims to solidify defense on the king's flank, while preparing for potential counterplay along the 3rd rank. Liberating the f-file to challenge black's pawn structure, this gambit aims to seize the initiative. Pressing the d-pawn now forces white to reconsider the king's safety after such a material exchange. Unblocking the bishop allows it to re-establish a menacing diagonal towards the enemy king. Reasserting pressure on the e-file, this maneuver aims to exploit the weakened kingside and create counterplay. Unblocking the bishop allows it to influence the queenside, creating new attacking possibilities against the weakened pawn structure. Unleashing queen activity, this maneuver boldly challenges white's queenside dominance and seeks counterplay amidst the pawn structure chaos. Centralizing the rook to control the 2nd rank and prepare for potential pawn advances. A daring queen sortie, aiming to disrupt white's setup but potentially overexposing the monarch. Seizing the open b-file, this captures a pawn and creates immediate threats against black's weakened structure. Black aims to dislodge white's formidable rook, seeking counterplay and potential piece activity. Probing the file with the bishop aims to disrupt black's pawn structure and create potential mating nets. Asserting queenside presence, this challenges the rook's defensive posture and opens avenues for counterplay.